Hi, and welcome back to Continual. I'm your host, Jim Nettles, and tonight on the panel room, we're going to be taking a look at indie filmmaking. So before we go too far down this particular rabbit hole, let's see who all is joining us and bringing their expertise. So Matt, you're up first.
Call from Denver City up.
My name's Matt Donahue. I'm a musician, artist, filmmaker, writer, and professor at the Department of Popular Culture at Bowling Green State University.
Hey, Alidria, you're up second.
I'm Alidria Hurt. I'm mostly a novelist who has dabbled slightly in filmmaking.
Bill?
Hi, I'm Bill Mulligan. I'm a high school science teacher who, since 2005, has been making a lot of indie films with his friends.
Marks?
Hey, Marks Pyle. I'm author, podcaster, and filmmaker. Graduated from Vancouver Film School many years ago. And yeah, that's me.
And Hansi.
Hansi Oppenheimer, Squee Projects, and I'm a guerrilla filmmaker and artist and writer now.
Yes, you've come to the dark side. You two are now.
It's fun.
Yeah.
So Matt, I'll start with you on this. Kind of what brings your interest into the idea of filmmaking, and all the things around it. What really grabs you?
Well, gosh, I got my introduction to film really just, as a kid. And my older brothers worked at a movie theater in Northwest Ohio and Maumee, Ohio, called the Maumee Indoor. And so always going to movies as much as I could as a kid. And my parents were also big fans of PBS and PBS programming. And so what really interested me was the documentaries that is a big part of PBS and PBS programming. And so that kind of really inspired me to deal with more of the sort of oral history aspect of making films. I guess that's kind of what I do in terms of the projects that I've been involved in, working on sort of, you could say, oral histories, and mainly focusing in on documentaries and such, usually about projects that either I'm involved in directly or pop culture projects that I'm inspired by.
Alidria?
I came to filmmaking. Well, I came to film and like you said, as a kid, you start consuming media. But I got into filmmaking the same way I got into fan fiction. I looked at something and said, I can do better than that. I have proven that I can't, but
Yet.
that was the initial thing.
Bill?
Well, I grew up in upstate New York. We only got about 5 channels, but they showed a lot of movies. And at a pretty early age, I fell in love with stop motion animation. The work of Ray Harryhausen, Willis O'Brien, King Kong, Seven Voyages of Sinbad, all that stuff. And I had to know how it was done. So really, even before I got into films proper, I got into filmmaking. I wanted to know how to do it. I got a Super 8 camera and just started making my own animation films. Wanted to be the next Ray Harryhausen. Discovered there is no next Ray Harryhausen. That was a lightning strikes once event. But still really got into special effects. And that's eventually, years later, when I found that there were other people who wanted to do this too, I was able to offer my services in doing special effects and makeup effects.
Marks?
I've always loved storytelling and consuming stories, and especially television. I love telling stories in like a series format. So after getting the more practical degrees, I guess, in psychology and computer science, I really wanted to do something more creative, and I took the expensive route because YouTube wasn't quite as filled with great information as it is now. I went to film school and then worked up at Canada a little bit, and then came back to US and got to make my own short stories, short films, and web series, and then work on a lot of other people's that they different capacities, either as a co-producer or sound or whatever, both indie production and otherwise. And just really enjoyed it a lot. So I don't do it quite as much as I did before, but I just enjoy telling stories. So whether it's books or film, books are maybe a little bit easier. You don't have to work with as many people at least as you do with a film, right? But I think that helped me a lot, being able to communicate and work with a lot of people, to work with cover designer, editor, and such too. So, because it's an important skill to develop, and yeah, and I love experimenting with filmmaking stuff too, just playing with the different genres and mix matching.
Nancy?
Well, my dad worked for CBS. He was a cameraman initially, and then he ended up running the prop department. And then my parents ran a prop shop, so I kind of grew up around it. So yeah, I had a portable TV in my room and watched, consume media all the time. But I thought I was going to be an artist, in the fine arts. And I pursued that until I was starting to add like video to the art pieces as sort of performance-y pieces. And then it was just like, well, all this other stuff is unnecessary. I could just film it. And then I started sort of doing these oral history sort of documentaries, similar to the other gentleman who was speaking about that, about pop culture topics that I find interesting, or pop culture people like Joe Lansdale or Joe Bob Briggs.
So, Ledria, I'm going to start with you on this one. And, like you say, you've dipped your toe into the filmmaking world. Let's kind of dive into that idea. What do you wish somebody had told you before you gave it a first shot?
I wish someone would have told me that, just like everything else, you don't need anyone else's permission to do it. Because the reality is, I started in 48-hour film project, which is something that comes along once a year here in Savannah. So initially, the first year I was introduced to it, I was waiting for someone to tell me I could. And then the second year, I ran my own doggone team because I felt like it. Because I realized that it's like, wait a second, who am I waiting on permission for what? I am just as capable of getting 5 or 6 different people together, feeding them all pizza and soda, and we can figure it out over the next 48 hours.
No sleep till cut. So, Bill, how about you? What's something you wish somebody had told you when you were first getting started?
You need to find that team. You need to find that 5-person army. The specific roles, something that everyone's good at, something that they're particularly good at. Once you find that team of people, and the thing is, here's something I wish I'd known. There's a number of people who this is a bucket list thing. They want to do it, and then having done it, they don't want to keep on doing it. And then there's people where it gets in your blood, and you want to keep doing it till you drop. Obviously, I'm in that category, but a number of the people I started working with were not. And that leads to disappointment and conflict where one side is like, yeah, and the others are like, I really want to do something else. But they're afraid to say so. So fights start for no reason. I would say, I wish someone had told me, once you get that team, once you have those people who they're sticking it out to the end, divvy up, because it's expensive, where it can be expensive. So, Alan, you're the sound guy. Anytime you got a little extra Christmas money, get yourself a better microphone, get that boom mic and everything. Everyone, we're using Canon, okay? All cameras are good. We're all going to use Canon. That way we don't have to get the same thing, but we can all get different lenses and interchange and just try to work this as a long-term project, because it ended up being a pretty long-term project. Since 2005, I've been working with the same people. And that would have saved us probably some money and some grief.
Marks?
A couple of things. One, if you do go to film school or anything like that, I would say go to one that you plan on filming, like, do your career from. So, like, I went to Canada and I was great, and everything was made a lot of sci-fi stuff was made back then, so that's what drew me there. But then, they don't want Americans to stay there forever. or at least you got to go through a lot of stuff, of course, right, to immigrate. And so then if you move somewhere else, or if you go to California, but you're going to move to Utah or something, wherever, after it's done, it takes away some of the benefit, because it is about finding people and making contacts. And so it's really useful to go to a school or training somewhere where you're going to maybe try to work from that area, so you can stay with some of those people. And then to build off of Bill's comment, I really think, it is really about building that team of people. And as long as they're passionate, it doesn't matter if they have experience or not, because you can work with them and they can build that experience. As long as they got the grit and desire to do it, that's all it really matters. And that's, priceless. When you find a good team of people and you're used to communicating and working together, you can accomplish lots of great stuff and helps out a whole bunch.
Nancy?
Yeah, I haven't had that. That team of people. I've had enormous problems with editors over the years because they jump and say they want it to be on the project, and then 6 months in, they're like, this is too much work, I don't want to do it anymore. And they've left it a mess. And I didn't know the organizational process. So I think what I learned over the 30 years, and especially in terms of trying to find distribution and stuff, is that you have to be so organized about, the creative side will come. You'll figure that out. That's the easy part. The hard part is, make sure all the releases are assigned, making sure you have the cue sheet, making sure all that stuff is organized. So when you get it to a distributor, it doesn't cost you a fortune to get everything formatted correctly, because I had no idea and stuff was all over the place. And I was trying to put it together and I was just like, screw it. Troma Now wants it. Take it. They didn't require a lot.
Matt, how about you?
Oh gosh, I would have to say, for a lot of my creative projects, just the whole idea that sometimes working on them is sort of it's like a slow fuse. You want things to go faster, but they don't go faster. But you have to just sort of approach it as if things are sort of a slow fuse, and try not to rush projects. As the other folks have mentioned, have a good team of people around you and take their advice. And if you've got a sound guy who's so incredibly knowledgeable about sound, and he brings something up that is important, and you might think, well, that's nothing, that's really nothing, you got to listen to their advice. You got to listen to the advice of the other people around you in order to have the project be stellar.
So, looking at film, regardless, because whether it's short form, long form, anything else, because most of us are writers, have all at least gone into this foray. But the visual medium is such a different storytelling medium. So how you tell story, how you convey is very different. So do you want to kind of dive a little bit just into the idea of the storytelling medium as film versus writing versus some of the other things as to, scripting it? How do you actually go about, and what are kind of the big experiential differences you've got between the two? So Bill, I'll throw that to you first.
Well, that gives me a perfect opportunity to push my book, Ram, which started out as a script. And because of an unmentioned medical emergency that took over the whole world recently, it bad timing. So here I was stuck with a script that I really, really loved. And it, once momentum is lost, it's pretty hard to get it back. So I decided I'll turn it into a book. How hard could it be? Turns out very hard. It took about a year, learned a lot. So, and I'm very happy that Falstaff published it and all. Yeah, one of the things I discovered, it was too short, because a script, a movie script, is pared down. You eliminate a lot of extra stuff. And I'm not going to say eliminate fluff, but people, they get upset. Their favorite Harry Potter book is turned into a movie. It's like, oh no, they took this out and they took that out. The stuff they took out. Yeah, it's the problem is the stuff they take out. It's your favorite part, but it's spice. It's not the meal. A screenplay has got to be stripped down. Everything that's in it has to be there for a reason. There can't be any, which can also be a problem, because you'll notice when you're watching a movie, especially if you are a writer, when you watch a movie, you immediately realize when what seems like a throwaway line, there's no reason for it to be there unless it will turn out to be anything but a throwaway line. If someone in the first half hour says, what, don't let the kids play by that old well because it's dangerous. Okay, someone's going to fall in the well. Someone had better fall in that well, because if I get to the end of the movie, I'm going to be like, what the hell was that well thing all about? And so it ruins movies for you, because anytime there's a ranger that says, yeah, watch out for bears, I know that the end of the movie is literally a bear running at the camera with his mouth open. The end. It spoils it. And that's there should not be any fluff in your screenplay, but you have to realize that people know that. And I help run the Con Carolinas Film Festival. I can't tell you how many movies, short films, get sent in that are pretty good, but I know within 5 minutes that the end of this short film is that one of the characters is a vampire or a werewolf. And the difference will be, if the moon is at all presented in the first 5 minutes, that there is a full moon, it is a werewolf movie. That's the end of the film. And if not, it's probably a vampire movie. You've got to be so careful not to give away things, because audiences are expecting it. They're way more clever than you probably give them credit for, or at least my judges are, because that's the biggest complaint, is that the ending is telegraphed. It's not easy to put subtext and things in there to be able to do what, say, M. Night Shyamalan did with Sixth Sense, where at the end of the movie you're like, hey, this is BS, and then you go back and watch it again. It's like, no, by God, he really was, I don't want to give away the ending to those people who haven't seen a 30-year-old movie, but it makes perfect sense when you go back and watch it. That's skill. That's talent. It's not easy to do, but it's great when you do it.
Marks, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, this script is similar to what Bill's talking about. The script is like a blueprint. The dialogue and the structure of it is pretty solid, but a lot of the other stuff is kind of, it's going to get filled in by the director, the actors, the set dresser and stuff like that. And it's kind of done that by design so they can bring their creativity to it. But when you write a novel, you have to do all those parts. That's why it takes so much longer, because you can't just skip that. You're like, oh, I got to describe this and that. Okay. That was the hardest part. Like transitioning was like, oh, I gotta put all these details in here and stuff. And so, and scripts are usually present and tense, and books aren't necessarily. So there is, in books take, typically a lot longer to write because you're writing all those bits. But I do think, some of the best movies come from books, because you have such rich material to draw from, and it's got all the pieces you need to write a great script out if you want. I've done a little bit of that, trying to adapt existing stories, and it's been an interesting experience, going the other way. But yeah. So I enjoy, I guess when you've written a novel, and it's done with the editing stuff, you kind of feel like this is it. This is my novel. This is done, right? When you've written the script, it's just the beginning, and the real, that's a magical moment, but the real magic really starts to happen when you see those actors start performing. You start tweaking that script based on, on how performances are going, how chemistry between the actors are, what locations you can get or not get, and what shooting angles you have as an option. And so it's still very, very much this whole process as you go. The script is just the start versus the novel being mostly the finished product. So still got to get the awesome cover design.
Anzi, especially since you're doing a lot of documentaries and stuff like that, what's kind of the difference for you in terms of storytelling in written versus film?
Well, that's why I say guerrilla, because I go in there without any story in mind. I'm just asking questions, having conversations, talking to people about whatever topic, is of interest. And a lot of times it's fans I talk to. So it's very different. I have the visuals, because if I'm talking to fans and they're dressed up or they're wearing t-shirts or stuff, you have that visual. And then, I don't write it. I'll make a shot list of stuff, before I do a doc. But I kind of let the narrative flow from the footage I get, and then I start building it. I write it that way.
Matt?
Yeah, definitely a similar approach, as Hansi mentioned. Mostly all the work I've done has been sort of documentary based, and just sort of, really it's sort of almost, definitely I like the idea of the concept of the guerrilla filmmaking and sort of letting things kind of sort of see what happens, in terms of the interviews and that people give, and how, one person that you interview, and then they might say, oh, well, you got to go talk to this person, and that leads you into another direction, and you got to go talk to that person, and that leads you into another direction. That's kind of the fun part about it. It's like sort of like you're, sort of like a private investigator kind of thing. And then and then at the end of the day, just kind of trying to assemble it all and try and make it all fit. I try and work with a lot of, kind of music as well. So trying to make stuff fit with music, or like Hansi mentioned, in terms of the visuals and the photographs you're using, or album art that you're using, and that sort of thing. So it's, pulling together the interviews, that's certainly one huge part about it. But then dissecting the interviews and kind of trying to find images that might match up with the things that your interviewee is saying, or music that might match up with what your interview is saying, that kind of thing. That's the part of it that I guess lends to the storytelling aspect of it in terms of visual sense.
Ledra?
Well, I come through it a little bit backwards from everyone else. I started out writing novels first. So because I started out writing novels first, the first thing I had to learn about scripting was if the camera can't see it, it technically doesn't exist. So all of the internal monologue that I'm used to there being in a book, all the things that you can kind of I hesitate to say cheat with in a book, you can't do in a script. You have to, you literally have to deal with what the camera can see. And if the camera can't see it, it doesn't exist. Which also means that you can play with what the camera can and cannot see. But you have to learn how to do that.
So, Marks, having gone to film school and all the things that you've kind of gone through there, let's actually just talk a little bit about mechanics of filmmaking, right? I mean, it wasn't that many years ago where you're going to filmmaking, you had fairly large cameras, you had a lot of stuff. Now, if you're wanting to be an indie filmmaker, you can pretty much do it from an iPhone, right? The technology's changed a lot, the process has changed a lot. So from your perspective, looking at where we're at today, and somebody just wants to go start playing in indie films, where would you start? What does that process look like for you?
I mean, it just depends how you learn better, right? If you need that structure of film school, there's some good film schools out there. Although you need something I would suggest something that's very hands-on. You're more theoretical ones. And cheap, yes. That's the biggest hurdle, right? And I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, why did I spend so much money? And then other times I'm like, but it was a life-changing thing. It's great.
I paid 100 films for what I paid for film school.
Yeah.
They make 100 films. Don't go to film school.
Yeah. I know. That's the Kevin Smith thing. But you also, it's really about experience and learning from mistakes. One thing with film, but you can also do it if you get mentors, is just having feedback from people to find out when what you're doing is working and not working. Because your family and friends are all going to say it's the most beautiful thing they've ever seen in their life or something, if they're supportive.
You have obviously not met my family.
Not everyone, I guess. Or they'll say, I don't get it. Oh, why are you doing this or something? But You need some experienced people. There's great contests. I've directed a couple of film festivals and been judges on some, and those are great for being able to send your films to get feedback. Some of them give feedback. But even if they don't, if you're getting selected for especially a popular film festival, then you know you're doing something right. That's a good stepping stone. And then if you're able to go and you can see the audience reactions to it, that's amazing feedback to have. You know when the lines are working.
Yeah.
You see people tear up or they laugh at the right moments, hopefully, and stuff. That's great feedback. So I think the only thing film school can do is it just kind of like helps speed you up a little bit on a couple of steps, and then it's pretty much on the same level as if you just start right off scratch with nothing. but YouTube and your whatever camera you bought. But the great thing is YouTube and other resources are getting way better. Whenever I first started, YouTube was still limited to a limited amount of minutes they could have. There just wasn't as much information out there yet. And we were just getting over digital. Like when I went to film school, part of our school was film, and then part of it was with digital. Now, everything's digital and you got your 4K beyond.
Film school, we were doing in film, we were shooting on Bolexes. And by the second or third year, it was digital. It was like a VX1000, editing on Avid. We went from Steenbeck's to Avid like in a year or two.
Yeah, Avid. Yeah, and the film it was interesting to do, but it's stressful, right? If you ever had to reload your camera and one person, we had our films, and one, not my team luckily, but another team was working on their film, and they just accidentally flashed their film and lost the whole day's footage and stuff. Yeah, that's a nightmare, right? So. So it's always worrisome. You don't have to worry about that as much. I guess you could delete everything in accident, but back up everything. But anyway, that's what you got to do. Whenever I moved away, I really wanted to do my own films and stuff. So I worked two full-time jobs for almost a year to just buy my film equipment and get started. So that's what I mean. You have to have grit. You have to have grit if you want to make your own projects. If you want to work on other people's projects, you need network and then be willing to work long hours and be supportive of that person's vision. So,
Ansi, how about you? Kind of think about it from your perspective, because again, you're doing more documentaries, culture stuff, interviews. What does that process look like to you?
Sometimes I'll actually do like a kind of Fluxus prompt thing. I'll just reach out to the fans of whatever. For the Joe Bob Briggs doc I did, I reached out to John Waters, a whole bunch of people, and said, can you either shoot me a little video with a quote or send me a quote? And I got, Slums of Hollywood. They sent me this great video, and a whole bunch of people sent me videos, and then I assembled it that way. And it was, just what I got, which was really interesting. I like that sort of way of putting something together. I like the chance aspect of the whole thing, really. I kind of like, the wabi-sabi there. I don't know how it's going to go. Maybe it'll go off the rails. Let's just... Yeah.
Yeah, I always tell people it's like giving birth in a way. Not that a guy necessarily knows how that is, but you can imagine at least... you give birth and you're just like, I'm never going to do that again. It was the most painful process ever. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a miracle even happened, and then, at some point you're like, oh, I want to have another baby. So, and you forget all about how problematic it was. Same thing with filmmaking.
Yeah.
So,
Matt, how about on your side, especially, doing music, and that side of things. But, for you, what does it look like for you when you're working on a project?
Well, definitely, just be prepared that anything can happen, and doing stuff on the fly, and doing projects on a ghetto budget, and that I think is really key, and it's sort of, I think film is very much like what's going on in the music industry right now, whereas back in the day there were thousands of artists and musicians selling millions of records, and now there's millions of artists and musicians selling thousands of records. And I think that definitely applies very well to also, the film industry and other media forms as well. But definitely, Hansi and I are really on the same page. I love just the chance aspect of it all. And you just never know what's going to happen. And, you might have in your mind, going to interview someone for, a documentary project, and you have it in your mind, like, this is going to be the most amazing interview of your life. And you go there and, you have these expectations, and then it's a dud. And then suddenly the person that you think that will not be an amazing interview suddenly sort of is the most amazing interview that you've ever had. And just definitely, again, as Hansi mentioned, the whole idea of chance of it all. I mean, you just never really know what's going to happen. One of the really the first documentary project that I produced, directed, and wrote was a total fluke. It was a total fluke. I had written a book about the Heinz Farm Blues Club, which was one of America's premier blues and rhythm and blues clubs in the 50s and 60s. I try and do a lot of stuff DIY. And so I published, wrote the book, published it on my own, got the word out there on it. And as it turned out, a few years later, PBS was doing a part of their national focus was going to be on blues music. And so they deemed 2003 as the year of the blues. And so they had a number of national programming going on with Clint Eastwood doing his, blues series that he did. And then a lot of the local and regional PBS stations were also interested in doing documentary projects on blues music in their region of the country. And it just so happened that the PBS affiliate that's also connected to Bowling Green State University, where I work, they had gotten a copy of my book on the Heinz Farm Blues Club called I'll Take You There, an oral and photographic history of the Heinz Farm Blues Club. And they basically were like, well, we've got a copy of your book, and PBS is interested in doing a bunch of different blues programming, and would you be interested in doing a documentary on this project? And I tell you what, I jumped at the chance, because prior to this, I was basically doing these oral histories, running around with a Walkman and going to interview people and that sort of thing. So that was awesome. And then suddenly, like, we had signed the contract, and yes, this is going to happen, and they were interested and involved. And then lo and behold, B.B. King and Bobby Blue Bland, who had played quite a bit at the Heinz Farm Blues Club, were doing a gig in Detroit at the Fox Theater in Detroit. And it was like, it was exactly like Hansi mentioned. It was this whole idea of chance or karma or, the gods or however you want to call it. All of a sudden, it's like, well, B.B. King and Bobby Blue Bland are playing at the Fox Theater. Why don't we interview them? And unbelievably, they granted us an interview. And then it was like, well, this guy's got a connection with John Lee Hooker. Why don't we try and interview him? And so, got through to John Lee Hooker. And then it was a lot of the local guys who I had made connections with in the blues scene in the Toledo area, who were also, at the Heinz Farm Blues Club or playing shows in Detroit back in the 50s and 60s. The Toledo and Detroit area was like a major hub for, blues music. The economy was booming and so on. So I guess, to make a long story short, just this idea of chance, you never know what's going to happen. Another project I was working on for another documentary called the Amsterdam T-shirt Project, made all these connections the year prior of different T-shirt vendors and artists, and show up and, had this, what was, I thought, going to be the best interview of my life on the souvenir T-shirt culture of Amsterdam. And the guy agreed to it. And I maintained contact with him. We got there, and all of a sudden we show up with our camera equipment, and he says, no, I don't want to do the interview. And it was like, what? And then lo and behold, we're like, oh, well, now we're scrambling looking for other people. And then we come across, a fella that I didn't know about previously. And we called him up and he said, well, I'll do the interview, but I'm going out of town tomorrow on vacation with my family. So if you can be here today at 5, we'll do the interview. And we rushed over there and we did the interview at 5, and it was amazing. It was just unbelievable. So this just idea of chance, and you never know what's going to happen, and you just kind of got to go with the flow. And projects might take longer than you want them to, but it's just the nature of creative projects, I think.
And that style of documentary, I think, is just time consuming because you don't know where you don't have all your people in line. It's like a chain. So you're just following breadcrumbs.
Definitely.
So how about you, Olivia?
Could we repeat the question?
Well, kind of just diving deeper into it. You've had the 48-hour film challenge, right? So how was that experience for you? What is it about getting ready for that experience or diving into that world? For somebody that is interested in doing something for their first time, what did you do to get ready for that 48 hours?
To be completely and utterly honest, nothing. I literally did not. I went into it. I understood the reality of the challenge being that you go from concept to can in 48 hours. That was exactly as much as I knew about the whole thing. How to get it from concept to can, I didn't have a bloody clue. But you know what? I got a group. I got a small group of us together because I'm a local actor, so I knew most of the people who were looking for teams. I knew most of the people who had teams. I just basically said, okay, guys, I got no idea what I'm doing, but we're going to do it. So anybody who can help, tell me what we need to do, how we need to do it, how to set up these shots. I got my friend Amanda Mack. Shout out to Amanda Mack. Literally, was the head videographer on the set. She taught me how to frame shots because I did not know how to frame shots. I knew how to write the script because I had dabbled in scripting before. I had done 24-hour Playfest previously, so I had some idea of how to do scripting. But beyond that, I made that mess up as I went along. And you know what? It still came out under time, on time, and done.
Yeah.
Bill?
Hey, finishing a film is,
Yeah. I'm not sure what the question is either.
Well, I would actually throw it at you from a little more from the special effects side of stuff, right?
Okay. Oh, good.
What is it for you to get ready to do the effects for film? Get into, getting ready for the process.
It's if you're into special effects, if you want to do the special effects on something, it's critical that you speak to the people who are making the film. Be there on set if possible, because they will try to do things that they think are helpful and completely screw it up. So we did a Doctor Who fan film, and someone had to plunge their hand into the ground and pull out a human heart or something. And bless them all, they put up a green screen in front of the person. So he plunged his hand into a green screen and pulled it out. And I get this footage back. I'm like, what the hell am I supposed to do with this? I mean, if you just shown him stabbing his hand down, I could have made a mat. I could have cut it, and it looks like he's going into the ground. Now I've got to get rid of this green screen and replace it with something that it was a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare. But I couldn't be there that day. I had to go to prom. Special effects. There are so many things that can make your life easier. If they're shooting something and you're going to have to cut out the background or something, maybe you don't want them standing in front of an oak tree with lots of leaves. Maybe they could stand against a blue sky. A blue sky would be wonderful. it'll be kind of like a blue screen. And maybe they don't care where he stands, but you care because you're the one who's going to have to go in there. And God help you if you have to rotoscope. It's days of your life you'll never get back. It's just be there, think it out, tell people what's realistic and what is not realistic. If you're doing makeup, here's my advice to anyone doing makeup out there. If they come and they tell you, hey, would you just come? We just need to do a couple of cuts, maybe a scratch or two, or a burn. All right. Yeah, that's a lie. That's an absolute lie. You will get there. You will get there with your little stipple sponge and your fake blood, everything you need to do scrapes and cuts, maybe a little wax because you thought, maybe. And then they'll be like, yeah, we were thinking about it. Could you do like a full-on decapitation and lots of spurting blood and everything? Like, no, I do not keep a decapitated head of your lead actress in my trunk. How would that look? They come up with all these great ideas. So bring everything. Make your box of this is everything I'll probably ever need, and take that with you. Because 9 times out of 10, you're going to be reaching for that box for something that they never told you they were going to do on the spot. And sometimes you just have to say no. No, this cannot be done. I cannot show you stabbing someone repeatedly with a knife. And do you really want to show that anyway? It's gross and nasty and hard to do. And this is film. It's not a play. You can edit. You can use the magic of editing, which is way more effective. Alfred Hitchcock didn't have to show the knife going into Janet Leigh. You don't need to show it either. Yeah, okay. Audiences expect more. So maybe throw a little bit of CG blood or some, better yet, not real blood, but real fake blood. Mix up your tricks a little bit. Don't do the same thing every time. I think CG is great in its place, but practical is better. But it's hard to do, and I understand why people want to go all CG instead of practical. It just doesn't look as good. But if you mix it up, yes, there's a reason why Jurassic Park is still the best of the bunch. It's got the least amount of CGI. It's got the most amount of animatronics. And there's things that animatronics can't do. You can't build a full-size T-Rex that does everything a T-Rex could do. But it can do a few things really well, and it looks real because it is real. But when it's time to bite the actor playing the lawyer, no, you need to go to the CGI because that would actually kill him. So, but by that point, we've seen the real ones so many times that we're invested. We're buying into this thing has weight because it really did weigh a lot. And so now when the CG comes in, it doesn't look quite as airy as, don't get me started. There's a reason why Hollywood movies cost $200 million nowadays and don't look as good as films that, even adjusted for inflation from a few years back, would not be nearly as expensive. So yeah, for special effects, work with your crew, work with the people, tell them what's possible and what isn't possible, and what's going to be really expensive and what's not. Better to do it simple that you can do effectively than to try to do something that's just way beyond your means, and it's going to look crappy. It's going to look like garbage. Don't do that.
So Hansi, I'm gonna. Go ahead.
A horror short that I did all of those things. Bad green screen. I mixed practical effects. The makeup and stuff is awesome. But we shot it over a weekend, and my camera person dropped out the night before. So so I've never been able to edit it together because it's missing too much. So I was talking to an animator about seeing if we could animate sections of it.
Oh, that would be cool. Yeah.
Oh, but
don't throw anything out. Never throw anything away because you never know. With all the advances coming up now, it's probably just a matter of time when we can start using AI to fill in some of those gaps.
I'm doing it on TikTok now.
Well, that's kind of actually where I want to go next, is to talk about technology, right? Because, it wasn't that many years ago where CGI was, you were talking about Jurassic Park, where now CGI is pervasive. We look at the different technologies we got to both film, record audio, record video, communicate around the world, different styles. How much has the technology of filmmaking really changed, and how much of it now benefits the indie filmmaker? What can somebody do just purely from that tech standpoint, to dive into it? And in thinking about that, is there also something about that that gets lost because maybe the technology does too much of how it does it? Hansi?
I think there might be a prejudice against the technology because people see it, as like a trick. It's like it's not really an art if it's. But I think it's a mixed thing. Like, it's on the one hand, it's great to have access to this kind of technology. Like when I shoot at cons, I mean, it was a nightmare bringing a real camera and stuff in there. But with my phone, I can whip out my phone and shoot an interview in 5 minutes. Nobody notices anything. It's great for the kind of work I do. But I mean, like if I had a sound guy in a convention, I mean, because I always have the problem. I'm shooting in convention centers, parking lots, like literally all the worst places you could possibly be shooting. So there's always like noise and problems. That doesn't bother me because I kind of like the aesthetic of it being funky. I prefer that to something really stylized and perfect. But John Waters made me want to be a filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
Matt, how about you? What are your thoughts in terms of technology, filmmaking, how it's changed over the last few decades?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think definitely, going back to what I mentioned earlier, where, it was thousands of artists selling millions of records, or thousands of filmmakers, making movies, and now it's millions. But I think also in a cool way, that's actually really been incredibly liberating for people, being able to do these. And again, I'm more into the whole documentary element of it all, because I love the whole like notion of storytelling and oral history from that point of view. But just the fact that it's kind of more liberating now, where you can just basically, as some of the folks on the panel have mentioned, you can just have your little iPhone and do an amazing interview and intersect some amazing visuals and have some cool music and have a cool little project. And just, the avenues and the platforms, again, YouTube, TikTok, Film Freeway is some avenues that you can get the work out there and at least get the work seen. I just think from a creative point, it's actually gotten better. It's an awesome thing that there is this technology available to folks, and you're not just limited to, having to buy the expensive camera or, and so on. So I just think while again, there is this notion of millions of filmmakers getting thousands of views, but that's also an awesome thing, man. And just, I love how, little quirky topics can now be documented. Whereas back in the day, if you went to say PBS or, some more of an establishment, filmmaking company, and said, I want to do a documentary on, art cars, and they'd laugh at you. They'd be like, no, we're not going to put our money into that. And now you don't have to wait for them, and you don't have to deal with the gatekeepers, and you can do it yourself. And that's really, again, I'm totally about the whole DIY aspect of it all, because, that's just so much more fun than having someone hanging over your head, telling you what to do and what you can't do and that sort of thing.
Alidria, how did tech come into play for you guys making decisions about the 48-hour challenge?
Well, all of the people on my crew had their own equipment. Amanda, Brian, they owned the cameras. Amanda had a boom mic because she actually did her own feature film previously. So we had the technology necessary to do it. Nowadays, if I was doing it again, I'd probably set up A on one iPhone, B on one iPhone, and lavalier mic all of my actors. But but that would be something that I would have to go back and revisit. Because, well, who says you can't?
Talk to Ben Edlund about that. He, he's redone The Tick so many times, and I talked to that, and he said apparently there's this filmmaker who makes the same film over and over and over, but it's with different actors each time. So you can revisit it.
Bill?
I love technology. I have no fear of AI whatsoever. I do understand some of the controversy and everything. And maybe if I really believe that it could ever write as well as I can, I'd feel bad, but it can't. I mean, I'll worry about AI when it can figure out how many fingers are on my hand, which seems to be a real problem for it. There's no personality there. But as a tool, oh, it's wonderful. And we're just scratching the surface. This is going to be the golden age of animated short films, because I think Adobe's about 5 minutes away from releasing something where you stick in your script and it comes up with storyboards. Oh, that's awesome, right off the bat. And then they're going to be like, with a few more tweaks, we can animate the storyboards. It's like, so we just made an animated film from a script. And I know people are like, oh, they're all going to stink. It's going to be terrible. People are going to be making hundreds of animated films. What about all the good animators? The good artists will always take whatever tool comes along and make the rest of us look like chimpanzees. Photoshop was going to end art. No, it's a tool now that great artists do amazing work with Photoshop, just phenomenal stuff. Yes, you can make, if you go to the multiplex, all the posters look like trash, but that's a decision that the studios have made, that everything's got to be in amber and blue and everything looks the same, and Morgan Freeman's in the corner even if he's not in the movie. I mean, they decided that all the posters have to look the same. With the tools we have now, people could be making amazing posters. I think, unfortunately, now we're training the audiences not to appreciate something that's different. But it's just going to make it easier to do. And you know what? The movies that I grew up with that made me fall in love with film, the Roger Corman movies, the Universal horror movies, the Star Trek, the original series, every person who has Adobe Suite is capable of doing effects that were not even possible for those things. I see Star Trek fan films made that look infinitely better than Star Trek, the original series. Now, the scripts are not that good. And there's the problem.
Well,
ultimately, it all comes down to the script. But if you have a good killer Star Trek script, there's people who have built sets that match the original, and you can do effects they only dreamed about. There's nothing stopping you, except maybe the lawyers from Paramount, for making a great Star Trek film. But I would suggest, I love fan films, don't get me wrong, but I would suggest stop playing in someone else's sandbox. Maybe Doctor Who is, you can't make your own Doctor Who film and make money from it, but there's nothing stopping you from making a movie about a time-traveling alien who's got all kinds of cool wizardry and things. Okay, don't call it a sonic screwdriver. Don't be an idiot. And if the only reason you're making a film is that you want to have a lightsaber fight, okay, well, then make your Star Wars fan film. I would suggest there's probably better reasons to make a film than a lightsaber fight. But this is the golden age, and we're all, so many people are moping around. Oh, this is going to ruin everything. Oh, I running the Con Carolinas Film Festival, the quality of 10, 15 years ago, what was best film back then, to what we reject now is just mind blowing. There's so much good stuff that comes along now. It's just marvelous. I'm an optimist.
Marks, what's your thoughts on technology?
Technology, good. No. But to flesh that out more, I know it's amazing what can be done now. Just even when I first started, the cameras are just so much better and smaller and easier to move. The sound equipment now is smaller. I mean, besides being able to shoot on your camera or your phone, I mean, even if you upgrade something else, it's still quite small, and it's nothing compared to like when you have to use film and such. And the post-production is great. Like, I'm editing sound all the time, and I love the developments for Adobe Audition and stuff. Just noise reduction, ADR, everything's infinitely easier than it used to be, faster. and better. So so I think it's great, and I think AI is just one of those things. It's not the tool; it's how people use them or abuse them. So if studios decide they're going to be like, oh well, we want AIs to decide what's a good movie and stuff, and you have to listen to the AI feedback and notes, that would be not great. So, but it just depends upon how people use them. Otherwise, you can use AIs to give you feedback, and there may be a couple of things in there that you go, oh, I didn't think about that. That's great, and you were able to generate that in 5 minutes versus hiring somebody for a bunch of money to consult for that, and maybe that's worth something for me. But yeah, right now AI cannot write as well as people, and for sure. And even if it gets really great, it's still going to be like how I think Bill is alluding. It's going to write to a formula, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I find it's really great for like marketing things, because marketing is very formulaic, and it's great for that.
Ads, all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great for that. It's makes jazz. I'm like, here, jazz this up for me, and then I can play around, and it's great for that. But writing a real script is just going to be like really formulaic. Actually, if you pop in some stuff and you tell it, give me a variation, give me a variation, give me a variation, those variations look very similar to each other sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard people like say like, oh, my character's first name is the same every time for some reason. So it's going to always. It's going to be like how we complain a lot about movies being formulaic now. I mean, if studios try to totally go that way, it's going to be so formulaic and such. But it can still be useful as an enhancement tool. It can be useful to help you with editing. It can be useful, and whatever. It could be a useful tool just to help speed things up sometimes. If you're just like, I can't think of this word and something better, look at my thesaurus and go, give me 5 options and give you 5 options, and then you can run with something like that, perhaps.
I think you're right, but doesn't that offer maybe an opportunity for indie filmmakers if the Hollywood stuff becomes very cookie cutter and it's already well on its way? Isn't that like the perfect opportunity, what happened in the 60s and stuff, for the indie folks to swoop in and just stand out from the pack just by being original and creative and different from everything else?
It could be, hopefully.
I mean, like Skinamarink got so much, coverage, word mouth, because it was such an odd film. Nobody could really make sense of it.
Mm-hmm.
And like, you go back to Kuchar Brothers or Stan Brakhage. It's like maybe we can squeak some of that in on streaming media.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of the horror films by oh my gosh, is A24? Or am I making? Is that their name?
Yeah,
Heredity and others. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
That's all very. And I probably wouldn't come with that, right? Because it's breaking formula in many ways for horror, and that's what makes it stand out. It makes a lot of the productions stand out. So yeah, I think it's just a matter of, you're right. I think those independent voices might get a boost because of that.
Yeah,
just need a platform, a little money, help and give those.
And then
voices.
what happens is they get snapped up, they get taken to Hollywood, they come up with their Hollywood thing, and you're just like,
yeah,
what happened?
I know, it's a cycle.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna throw one more question out there. Because I mean, like any topic, we just have really brushed over the surface of getting into indie filmmaking, and we've got a lot of different kind of specialties and levels of experience here. So for everybody, we always usually have that thing of, oh yeah, I want to make sure I touch on this. Well, now's that time. So Matt, I'm actually going to let you start with this one too. What's something that you think we haven't talked about that maybe we ought to spend a couple of minutes on?
Gosh, I would just have to say, maybe a little bit on the music end of it. Licensing music is such a hassle, and it's so expensive. And I alluded to one of the projects that I was involved in earlier in our conversation, the Heinz Farm Blues Club documentary. And great project. Could have generated more money for the station. However, the station didn't want to deal with the music licensing end of it. And I get that. However, if they had, then they would be able to generate a lot of revenue from that particular production. And so I would say from the music end of it, and again, I'm all about the buddy system, or again, trying to just do it yourself. And so I would say, in terms of the music end of it, try and find friends who are musicians that you can feature their music in your film, because the licensing of it is really a killer. I mean, it's absolutely a killer. There's a lot of obviously regulations in terms of trying to get certain music used in your film, and then trying to track down the publisher or the record label that owns that particular song. And it's just such a hassle. And it really sucks, because there's a lot of great music documentaries that, need to be made. But there's the barrier is really the music licensing end of it. And that really, really is not fun. In terms of visuals for go around, one thing that I've been doing on this latest project that I've been working on living legend guitarist, music guy by the name of Skip Little Axe McDonald. We've just been using a lot of album art and just trying to, buy albums and buy CDs and, find stuff out there digitally as a kind of go around, again, for dealing with the photograph end of it. So, I would say, if you can find some workarounds in terms of the music, finding friends who make music, or that end of it, or again, if you're working on visuals, again, from the music end of it, try and maybe work with album art as much as possible. I would just say, always try and find a workaround, and don't let those kind of financial gatekeepers, copyright gatekeepers, etc., hold you back.
Leidra, for you, what's something we haven't touched on that you think we ought to?
Be friggin' careful. Because reality is, just because you think it looks cool and your friend thinks they can do it, doesn't mean they can do it safely. Ooh. And the last thing you want to do is have your film get axed because your buddy is in the ER for trying to do a backflip off the playground equipment and screwing his legs up.
Bill?
Yeah, I want to touch on what she said. For the love of God, if you're thinking about using real fire or bullet squibs made with firecrackers or any really bad ideas, please call me and I'll talk you out and give you some alternate suggestions. I would say sound. And sound doesn't interest me in the least at all. But if you had a choice between getting a really good camera lens and a really good microphone, go for the microphone. When we're looking at films for the film festival, more of them get rejected because of bad sound than anything else. You'd be better off with really good sound, all else being equal, good script, good acting, everything else. Great sound and visuals will get you a lot further than great visuals and bad sound, because bad sound is annoying. Bad visuals can sometimes work for you. If it's blurry, it's like, oh, that's intriguing. I wonder what's going on here, But bad sound just makes you go, what? Rewind, repeat it. I don't know what they're saying. So what good is the script if I can't understand it? If if film is hypnotic, it puts you into a kind of a trance. But if every time A is talking, there's a cricket in the background, and then when we cut to B in the same scene, the cricket's gone, and then the cricket comes, immediately it just takes you out. You're aware that you're watching a movie. And the hypnosis is gone. So sound, just get yourself some good sound, a boom mic. Never use the microphone in the camera. That's just for syncing up with hopefully the good sound that you recorded on something else. Sound. Really, we've sent films back and said, listen, if you fix the sound, fix this horrible sound, I guarantee this picture will not only be in the festival, but it's going to be up for awards.
Well, El Mariachi, right? They spent $1 million to do the sound.
That's the thing they never tell you about.
Film that they spent
whenever like someone makes Paranormal Activity for a lunch budget or something, and then we picked it up and it made it, but they don't tell you they spent a fortune bringing that up to code for being released. Yeah, it's not easy, And that's why the sound guy might be one of the ones you have to pay. There's some people you may have to pay, cinematographers and sound guys, because they can make money doing weddings and albums and stuff for other people. They're doing this out of the kindness of their heart, working on your silly little project. So you may have to throw some shekels their way.
Marks?
Yeah, I would second that too. Most of my, or majority of my paid gigs working for other productions were doing sound, because I learned how to do it, and I can do it, even though it can be tiring to hold that boom sometimes, boom pole, for long periods of shots. Because the sound is so important. It is like, it's the first thing that eliminates a film when we're judging and stuff, because it does, like Bill said, it makes amazing cinematography look like crap cinematography. It just makes the whole thing look bad. As soon as I hear bad sound, I'm like, this must be low budget, even if it's not. And the sound's super important, and I guess you just need to, if it's your project, your script, just be the biggest cheerleader for it. You need to lead by example and really be excited, energetic, even though you have doubts. Obviously, you're worried and nervous and stuff. You need to try to be as positive as you can and try to motivate people to want to work on this project, especially if you can't pay them. And you need to appreciate those people. Don't put them in unsafe situations, as was said earlier. And even if they want to, because they probably will, actors will they're people pleasers, and they will do silly stuff they shouldn't do. They're like, I'll ride that horse, even though they can't ride a horse at all, or something, And then, so care about your team, put together the best team you can find. Be willing to work with those team members and teach them what they need to learn. And listen to them, and it's a collaborative process. So they bring different skill sets, and let them be a part of the creative process and put their piece into the project.
Hansi, what's your last words?
I think every project is sort of a learning experience. Like no film or project is ever going to be exactly the same. So there's always something that, you don't know, you have to figure out the workaround, and I kind of love that part of it. That's nice. And right now I'm just doing TikToks because my husband passed away recently. So I've just been not out much, but sort of staying to a 3-minute format has been kind of interesting. It's sort of nice to play in other playgrounds and sort of like, oh, what can I do with 3 minutes? Can I, you can just lip sync, or I could do a series of a bunch of shots and actually tell a little story. So I think you just need to keep being creative, keep making things, and don't judge yourself too much on them. Just look at them as experiments and move on.
Well, I think we've gotten everybody a pretty good primer of starting to dive into indie film. But before we get out of here, let's make sure everybody knows where to find you guys: websites, social media, and anything you want to promote. So, Matt, you're up first.
Yeah, my name is Matt Donahue. I'm a musician, artist, filmmaker, writer, and professor at the Department of Popular Culture. Folks can check out some of my music and a few of my documentaries at Mad45 TV on YouTube. Again, that's Mad45 TV on YouTube. And I also have my personal website, which is background information, and that's md1210.com. And again, that's md1210.com. I love working with people. I love working on all sorts of projects or brainstorming. So don't hesitate to reach out. I'll throw it out there. I know it's a little unusual, but you can always reach out to me via email, md1210@yahoo.com. That's md1210@yahoo.com. Currently, I'm working on 2 projects. One is on living legend Skip Little Axe McDonald, originally from Dayton, Ohio. Went to the East Coast and was the primary guitarist and did a lot of co-production work for Sugar Hill Records, the infamous Sugar Hill Records label, which was so groundbreaking in terms of rap and hip hop music with songs like Rapper's Delight and The Message by Grandmaster Flash and others. Skip has had an illustrious solo career under the name Little Axe. So I'm working on a project on him that we're wrapping up. And then after that, the next project is on the drummer Keith LeBlanc. And Keith is an associate of Skip's, who was the drummer for a lot of that material. And again, just kind of trying to keep it creative, keep working on all sorts of projects. As Hansi mentioned, just try and, keep going and stay busy and always try and just kind of get the projects out there and keep it up.
Alidria?
AlidriaHurt.com. You'll find my books there, but you will not find my films there because I haven't been audacious enough to put them up on the internet.
Bill?
You can go to BillMulliganBooks.com, where I am slowly building this website. And it's books.com, but really there's only one book. So that's fine. And you can get that at Amazon from Falstaff. I'm on the Video Store Junkies podcast and Decades of Horror, GruesomeMagazine.com podcast, and still doing films and stuff. People call me up. I've acted in more things than I've done anything else, which is ridiculous because I have a super narrow range. But Dave Harlequin's he says he has a role for me. It's perfect for you, which drives me crazy though, because I'll go out there and it's like I haven't seen the script yet. It's like, oh, so what's this perfect role? And I look it up. It's like drunken pervert number 2. I'm like, well, that's hurtful. I'm neither one of those things, but yeah. So I'm still going to make movies.
It is
with
Harlequin, so
yeah. So exactly, what do you expect? But I really urge people to get into it. And if you're a parent who has a child, maybe they don't have a lot of friends, get them a movie camera and let them tear loose. They'll make all sorts of friends, and they can work with their bullies. Are they being bullied? Great, hire take the bullies and make them fall out of trees. They can be ninjas. He doesn't have to be filming. You just watch them as they fall out of trees. Do it again. I know I wasn't convinced. It didn't look like it hurt enough. It's like joining band. It's just a great way to instantly make friends, and they're doing something creative. Nothing wrong with that.
Marks?
You can find me at markspile.com. And also, if you're interested in, the books are there too, but if you're interested in the anthologies that I edit, publish, you can go to cabotcrossing.com. That's Cabot. It's like rabbit spelled with a C instead of an R. It's the infamous mix of a cabot and a rabbit. Like our newest book, I don't know if you can see it over there, Tales of Monstrosity, Monsters, Myths, and Miscreants. It's all 19 stories, different kinds of monsters, lesser known monsters, or twist. And yeah, and film wise, I don't have anything really to publicly show right this second. That's recent. But I am writing on scripts, and I got like a script I co-wrote. It's going through some festivals, got nominated for on a couple of them, and then I co-produced a horror film, which is stuck in visual effects limbo. It's everything else is done, but we only got part of the visual effects done because unfortunately our visual effects artist passed away. Oh. Yeah. So, but we're working on getting that, finding somebody new. So, and always looking for other projects to do, books and film. So,
Hansi?
Hansi Oppenheimer at squeeprojects.com, and Squee Projects pretty much on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and everywhere else. And I have my first essay being published in a book that's coming out this fall on the boys, and another essay coming out on Our Flag Means Death a little later in the year. And I'll be at Dragon Con, and my Joe Lansdale documentary is streaming on Troma now, and it's also on Vimeo.
And I've had the pleasure of being your host tonight, Jim Nettles. You can find me at jamesdnettles.com, authoressentialsworkshops.com, the speculative-fiction-academy.com, creatingprose.com, and of course here at ConTinual. And we'll see you again soon.